Life is like a hurricane here in Duckburg. Race cars, lasers, aeroplanes. It's a duck blur. Might solve a mystery or rewrite history. Ducktales, woohoo. Every day they're out there making Ducktales, woohoo. Tales of daring, do bad, and good luck tales. Ducktales, everybody. That's what we're talking about tonight. Welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm your host, Rockin Robbie Billups, and we've got a great guest joining us today, the writer of the upcoming DuckTales comic book from Dynamite, which releases, I believe, in November, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. But by the way, happy Friday the 13th, everybody. Join me tonight on Blood Splatter Chatter at 6:30 p.m. Central Time as we talk about Friday the 13th, Part 2, which is by far the best of the franchise. But all that aside, let's bring in the writer of the upcoming DuckTales comic book, Brandon Montclare. Everybody give him a mighty, hearty, and warm station. What is up, my man?
Hey, hello. Thank you, Robbie, for having me. You can really carry a tune. I thought you were going to bring me in on woohoo, but I'm glad you didn't because I wouldn't have been able to match you.
Well, I was hoping that when you come in, you would be like, danger, watch behind you.
An encore. Yeah.
Dude, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, I'm sure, to join us today on Pop Culture Philosophers to have this chat. So I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, first of all, it's Friday the 13th. I got to know, are you a fan of the franchise? Do you have a favorite? What's going on there?
Yeah, it's funny growing up with all that stuff. Friday the 13th, somehow not so much. I'm sure I've seen them all, but not multiple times. I have a soft spot for Jason Takes Manhattan because, that's my hometown. But no, certainly Halloween and Freddy movies and all that stuff. But yeah, somehow not so much Friday the 13th. Why would that be? I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's fine probably because it was oversaturated. There was like a new one every single year. It dominated horror in the 80s. And I agree, like Halloween to me is so clean of a franchise. Well, it's got its ups and downs, right? But Halloween's got some really great movies in it.
Halloween 3 is the second best one, if you ask me. But I don't know. Is that among the aficionados? How does 3 rank? I know there's a very big fan base for Halloween 3. But I don't know if that's considered cool or not. I liked it very much.
I'm a part of the fan base for Halloween 3. I think it's the third best one because I'm also a big fan of H2O. Actually, the one where LL Cool J's in it and like Jamie comes back and all that stuff.
She came back more than once, so I sometimes get confused. But now that you said LL Cool J, I remember.
The one they're at the school. Josh Hartnett's
I was going to just say they're running around the school, right? Does he wind up? Does he wind up at the bottom of the mine shaft in that one, or is that a different one?
That's a different one. This is the one where it ends where she like beheads him, right?
Okay, right.
And it ends very definitively, and then they do Halloween Resurrection, and that one's a terrible one, and in my opinion was the worst one until they did Halloween Ends. But
yeah, like the new ones I saw, and I didn't think they were bad, but they really didn't do anything for me. And the ones the old new ones, kind of the same thing. But once it got into the reboot, not even a reboot, but I mean, like I said, H2O, and was the next one after that? Was that when they were all filming the reality show in the house?
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
By those two, I kind of faded out. But all the ones with Donald Pleasance and obviously number 3, I like. But the first one kind of stands alone. But I think it's fair to say
3 is amazing. Like honestly, 3 is great. It's got great music and it's got a great concept, and I think that it's aged very well. And
are we going to hear this? Are we going to hear the Silver Shamrock jingle?
I don't know how many days exactly it is till Halloween now.
Okay.
Hold on.
Very good.
Something days till Halloween. Yeah. Oh man, I love that. I want all 3 of those masks actually, but I would never put them on because I don't want my brain to turn to like snakes and bugs and maggots and stuff like that. Right.
Is it your brain or is it your whole face? Right.
I guess it's your whole face. It's a little unclear.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned Jason Takes Manhattan though. That was my favorite growing up because I think that one came out in like 89. Yeah. So I'm like 8 years old, and I remember getting that at the video store. As an adult, you watch it and you're like, man, he's not really in Manhattan very often.
Yeah, there's not too much. So, but if it's not now, it used to be back in the day, it was on TV. You'd have to watch it and kind of maybe go back and forth until that scene comes. Now I guess you could go right to the Times Square stuff, and
Yeah,
that's
they filmed most of that in, I think, Vancouver, I think so. I think
on the
that's what.
boat, right? Yeah. Was it
And then
prom
they did
that they
go
were celebrating?
graduation party, right? And they go on that cruise because
Right.
apparently the Atlantic Ocean is connected.
Yeah. to Lake Crystal Lake or whatever it is. Yeah.
But I like that one. It's got that cool moment where that dude tries to square up on Jason and just knocks his head off.
Yeah.
But we're here to
I don't.
talk about DuckTales, not Friday the
Yeah, it's
13th. Right?
a bit of a different tone. The book I'm working on.
DuckTales was a favorite of mine. Late 80s, early 90s. I mean, I'm like the right age for this. I loved it. A series of adventure with Disney characters that I grew to know and love. Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Uncle Scrooge, of course, who a lot of people don't realize it nowadays, but Uncle Scrooge is up there as far as comic book icons. He's up there with Captain America and Spider-Man and Hulk and Batman and Superman. Like, it's that big of a deal. Like, Uncle Scrooge has sold as, like, if not as many more comics than people like Superman and Batman and stuff. Like, Uncle Scrooge is a big deal, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Certainly, I realized it, and it was the biggest reason that I agreed to do the book. That I was excited to do the book. As you said, Uncle Scrooge has been around a real long time. If you go to Europe, and that's also like South America and different places too, but it's still huge over there. I remember, this is years and years ago. My wife's totally different than me. I do comics. She's a chemical engineer, and she was doing a postdoc. And one of the other postdocs found out that I was working in comics. I just started. I was an intern and then an editor at Tokyo Pop. And she's, comics, you mean like Uncle Scrooge, like Huey, Dewey, and Louie, except she didn't call them Huey, Dewey, and Louie. She called them Click, Clack, and Cluck, or something like that. It was the Dutch, what they're called over there. And they're on postage stamps over there. They're big news, big in Italy, big in all of Europe. And here's not too shabby either. It's been around a long time, very much influenced George Lucas and Steven Spielberg both. They have never been shy about saying that. And if you think DuckTales feels a bit like Indiana Jones, that's because Indiana Jones felt a little bit like Uncle Scrooge.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your history with DuckTales then? Did you watch the show back in the day? Did you have to go back and do a hard research, rewatch of all the stuff, including Treasure of the Lost Lamp? Right there.
That,
yeah, the DuckTales movie, if you remember that.
Yeah, that I do, and that is the whole series holds up. But but starting at the beginning, I was just trying to figure it out when we were saying. So I was maybe like, I guess I was like, the book is set in 1987 continuity, so not with the reboot, not with any kind of the other stuff. It's really meant to be that kind of core series, which lasted 3 seasons and a whole bunch of episodes. But I guess I was around 12 years old. But even at 12, I was like a little bit like too cool for school. I was. It might have been a couple of years earlier that it was like He-Man and G.I. Joe and stuff like that, or maybe it was around the same time. But that kind of stuff, I like more Thundercats or Galaxy Rangers or Inhumanoids, or more and more of that, like I said, the action oriented stuff that I maybe thought skewed younger. But looking back, it's so silly because, no offense to fans of that stuff, I have another spot in my heart reserved for it. But it doesn't really hold up especially next to DuckTales. It was such a great cartoon, and the movie was fantastic. So I did watch it all, but I watched everything type of stuff, and and as far as getting back into it, I have watched a bunch of the episodes, and I have 2 daughters now. One's 8, just turned 8, and the other one's 15. So they're a little bit far apart, but still very watchable. Still have a lot of fun looking at the episodes and kind of getting to know some of the more oddball characters that I can jog my memory and bring them up in in later issues. First series is going to be kind of the core guys. It's mostly Scrooge and Huey, Dewey, and Louie. But everyone's coming in, so I gotta make sure I got all my bases covered.
Yeah, for sure, because you got to please a lot of people, because DuckTales is a big deal to a lot of people. And I'm glad you mentioned some of those other properties like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Thundercats, and He-Man. Like Motu in particular, Masters of the Universe. I'm a huge Masters of the Universe fan. And one
Right.
of the
And that
things
was
I do is I still collect those figures. Like I buy all the
yeah,
vintage
sure.
ones because I loved them when I was a kid. When you go back and try to watch that show, though, as much as I loved it, it's yeah, there you go. The attack track, right?
Yeah.
I got
There's a
one for
man
the
at
kids.
arms. There's a man at arms someplace that you know, my
Yeah.
little one
Like
takes
well,
it.
like
My
He-Man,
little one takes it
super
and throws
cool.
it around the place.
Yeah, so like He-Man's like super cool toys, but when you go back, every time I try to rewatch He-Man, I'm like, okay, one episode
Yeah.
a week,
Yeah.
maybe at most, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
DuckTales is very clever, very, very
Right.
well written, and
Hmm.
there's a legacy there too that stretches back. We were talking about how Uncle Scrooge became such an iconic character in comics, right? Like
Right.
before any of the cartoons he was in or anything like that, I believe Uncle Scrooge's first appearance may have been in a comic book, right? But you're dealing with the legacy of
Yeah.
people like
Yeah.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, as you were about to say, yeah, Carl Barks, creation, and he's as much as Uncle Scrooge is a Hall of Fame character, Barks is a Hall of Fame creator for having created him in the
Yeah, I
comics.
just recently had Omar on from Near Mint Condition, and we were talking about that. He was like, dude, the Duck comics, like, I always looked at him like, oh, those are like comics made for kids. But when you really dive into it, you get into it, right? I've been a comic book retailer for a long time, over 20 years, right? And I remember
Yeah.
in my early 20s working at the comic shop, and all these old dudes would be like, nope, the best comics of all time are Carl Barks Duck comics, right? And then after that,
Yep.
Don Rosa, right? And I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, sure, whatever. No, there's some of the best comics out there. So there's a legacy attached to this, not just to the DuckTales show, but to those Duck comics by these legends in storytelling. Is that something on your
Yeah.
mind when you're crafting these tales?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. It's a bit of a tell, but I kind of like it where the position I'm in because most civilians, they just think of the DuckTales cartoon and say, oh, that was pretty cool. You know what I mean? Not knowing all the weight that Uncle Scrooge has as a character and Barks has as a creator, plus Don Rosa, as you mentioned. So it's I can kind of, and both Don Rosa and Carl Barks were cartoonists, so they were writing and drawing all their stories. I'm working with an art team, so there's a little bit of, hey, who do you think you are, Brandon Montclare, that you're doing a book that's at one point was done by Carl Barks, and I don't really shy away from that stuff, but at the same time, I could say, oh, I'm also doing DuckTales, so somehow I'm in the middle. Like I can, like if I'm, I can zero in at a certain spot and not have to be too intimidated, but also still stay excited and be proud of it. And anything I do, I always put my all into. But as far as the history goes, even fandom is connected to it because Carl Barks was only one of many artists working on all the Walt Disney comics and stories and the different titles. And back when he was doing it, they didn't credit anybody. This would have been the 50s, I guess, when he started. So people weren't credited. And, the fan base grows up around, DC and Marvel, basically, and so it's the fanzines. And so people like who through maybe Stan Lee and Jack Kirby start going back to some of the Golden Age artists. But for a long time, Carl Barks was unknown. He was just known as the good Ducks artist, literally. And so they would be, in the nascent fandom of people doing fanzines and like conventions where maybe 85 people would show up. There's a bit of a mystery behind it. And then there was a fan, and I'm not doing the story justice, but you can certainly look it up and find out about it. So some guy said, oh, and tracked him down and knew he was still alive. And luckily, Carl Barks got to spend his golden years as a guest at San Diego Comic-Con, surrounded by people who loved his stuff so much. But it really was just people he was so much better than the rest that people were able to pick out his stories, even though you're working in a house style, even though you have mostly a children's audience, even though it's all very simple, that no, this is the Barks stuff, not even knowing who it is. And all due respect to the other creators who might have worked on it, that he really stood out and was, in a lot of ways, one of the initial even superstars of comics.
Yeah, for sure. And then like later on, he starts doing those oil paintings, right?
Exactly.
And it's just like,
Yeah.
holy cow, that stuff is amazing, yo. People, I
Yeah.
know a lot of people in the industry today that are fans. They look at it and they're like, "You're lying. These you telling me these Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck comics are that good?
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
They really are.
absolutely.
And yeah, the comic book language, the comic strip. You know, like you said, Carl Barks is a cartoonist, right? So he's coming
Mhm.
up with it himself, and it's levels above most comics, I think, over the last 80 years. So like I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it's some of
yeah,
the great stuff, man.
yeah, yeah. And like I said, there's I kind of like all of it. So I used to work in a comic shop, and I always been a collector, and certainly, as much as I appreciate a very hard to find book, I'm like the dollar bin guy. I used to be quarter bins once upon a time. I like to kind of find stuff. So I have a lot of junky uh Disney comics and reprints, and like kind of they did the digest size, a lot of the stuff like the Archie digest size, and there's tons of stuff in there of all kinds of people, and they see like all these other great people that have also done. Like Marv Wolfman had a really long run as the writer of Ducktales, which I never even knew about until it was pointed out to me by the editor on our book, Nate Cosby. I was like, wow, look at that, another Hall of Famer working on Uncle Scrooge
Yeah.
and specifically Ducktales. Yeah.
You're standing on the shoulders of giants right now, Brandon, is what you're doing, right?
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, I certainly have nothing but respect, and luckily, just my something in my wiring still says, "Oh, it's just comics." So how about you know how much pressure can you really put on yourself? I'm not saving lives or anything like that.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that Spielberg and Lucas were influenced by those Duck comics, right?
Right.
Because a lot of people
Absolutely.
will look at DuckTales and be like, "Oh, this is just a riff on the Spielberg, Lucas 80s movies things, like a Muppet Babies." And Muppet Babies did that very
Right.
well. But you're
Yeah.
right, the influence is inverted actually there. Like the influence comes from those Duck comics, right?
Yeah. I mean, like chronologically, and if you did a timeline, it did. I wasn't there in 1987, or when wasn't sitting next to little Steven Spielberg in Arizona reading the comics either. So it's hard to say exactly, but just my best guess from kind of looking at the episodes and everything else. I'm sure some people knew, but so many people work on a cartoon, right? So it's probably just like in my head, I always think that probably a lot of people were working on it, saying, "Let's make it like Indiana Jones," and maybe they didn't even know that Indiana Jones was itself, very heavily influenced by the old Bark stuff. So I think you could just get like a feedback loop, and again, maybe that's why I feel, hey, it's fair game for everybody, to just try their hand at it.
Yeah, a lot of people look at these things. They're like comics made for kids. They're cute animals. They're funny. They're silly.
Yeah.
It's Walt Disney,
Mhm.
whatever. It's an adventure story. DuckTales is, right? And every episode was about an adventure. Are you really leaning into that aspect in this new series?
Yeah, very much so. I did Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur for 1,000 pages at Marvel, and a lot and that was a book that kind of was designed to sell into scholastic book fairs, but it was also part of the Marvel universe. So my approach to it, if anyone's read it, it was always all ages, and I take that very seriously as all ages, because sometimes kids' books, once in a while they're like really dumbed down for kids, and they're kind of very almost too basic. More often than that, though, they're like written for parents who buy the books for the kids. But I always wanted to do something that kids would genuinely like. And you talk about being 12-year-old watching DuckTales. I'm sure I was trying to score a couple of copies of Dark Knight Returns and issues of Savage Sword of Conan, and quarter bin diving for Creepy and Eerie Warren magazine. So you kind of, it's not that it's this kind of soft, very basic, sequential art. It's you really can appreciate all those types of things, I think, when you're a kid, but even as an adult, right? So it's I always say, look at the Warner Brothers cartoons, or like The Simpsons, and my 8-year-old can be looking at that stuff and really enjoying it, but at my age, or if you're my father's age, you should be able to look at that stuff and say, hey, this stuff is really well put together and I like it a lot. So
Yeah.
I take all ages seriously. It's for everybody, a little bit of that. So obviously it's easy to do when you focus on the action and adventure elements, but you still have a relationship that kind of works both ways. You have Huey, Dewey, and Louie looking up to their hero, and what better hero can you kind of idolize than the guy who's made trillions and trillions of dollars and had every adventure over every inch of the globe. And also Scrooge, as much as he's a curmudgeon, and he's a little more curmudgeonly in the comic in our comic and the old comics than he was in the cartoon. And he's like, well, maybe it gets to him that he knows he's a hero to these kids. And so you have that kind of generational interplay.
Yeah. So at my shop, we have an all ages section, and all the time, employees or customers, they'll be like, "Hey, where's your kids section?" And I always go, "Oh, we don't have a kids section, but we have an all ages section," because it's very important to me to understand that just because a book is appropriate for a 6 or 7-year-old doesn't mean that it should be dumbed down, right? And most of the stuff we have there, for instance, we have your Moon Girl work there, right? And those little digest size, they sell so freaking well, dude. And they sell so well because it's not something dumbed down. Ducktales never felt dumbed down to me. It's like Jeff Smith's Bone. Like that, to me, that's one of the greatest all ages comics of all time. Yeah, because you could be 80 years old and read it for the first time and really pull from it, right?
Yeah. I was probably, I guess, in my 20s when Bone came out, and it was a phenomenon that I followed in real time, and it was great,
Yeah, for sure. So I really appreciate your work there, and you also did Rocket Girl, which is a comic I'm a big fan of. So I just want to thank you
very
for
much.
Rocket Girl as well. What was it like when you're doing Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur?
Right.
I mean, you're taking like Kirby idea and trying to like move it. And like Jack Kirby's like the GOAT when it comes to American comics, right?
Of course.
What was that like, dude? You're continuing the legacy of so many amazing and prolific and important creators in our industry.
Yeah, it's so funny because I talking to you, and I tend to talk a lot, right? And talking to other people and talking about my new book, and I say, oh yeah, look at the Carl Barks stuff, and somehow in my mind, I mean, I knew, but I'm putting it together that I also did that with Jack Kirby. Although I will say with Jack Kirby, we definitely made a lot of changes to Devil Dinosaur. Not out of anything, not that I don't have any, nothing but the greatest admiration for not just Jack Kirby in general, but specifically the old Devil Dinosaur. But that was kind of just the directive that Marvel and me and Amy Reeder and Natasha Bustos, and then later Tamara Bonvillain, the colorist, and Travis Lanham, the letterer, who did the bulk of it with a lot of other great people helping out. But the idea was take Devil Dinosaur out of dinosaur world, where he basically fought other dinosaurs and ate cavemen and stuff like that, and bring him and create, and have this new character, Moon Girl, who's got the same name as Moon Boy, who was the supporting character in the Kirby stuff, but really make her the focus and have Devil Dinosaur be a character that she can bounce off of. But yeah, it's so, and that was another, again, like I said, it's not that that certain things don't scare me, but I guess not the specters of the great ones, because to me it was just like, yeah, it's like Kirby's doing cool stuff, and but I'm doing something different, so I didn't really feel the pressure to do Devil Dinosaur better than Jack Kirby did, because that would be a fool's errand, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Vthe one time on my channel said this: it's an honor to add to the mythology of everything that was built by these great people before me. And that's what you did with Moon Girl. Yeah. They did an animated series on it, right?
Yeah, and certainly the animated series, it's 2 seasons. They split the second season. So the first season, it was out last year. Earlier this year, the first half of the second season was out, but they still have some episodes ready to be released at some point. With how much streaming changes every day, I don't know exactly what the latest update on that is, but they certainly changed Moon Girl as much as I changed Devil Dinosaur. And you have to have, I think, yeah. And you can say, oh, well, I guess, you can take it personally, and somehow you do, but at least I know that you shouldn't, in silly and petty ways, where it's like, oh, why didn't they do what I did? Because do they not like it? Do they not get it? And you can just kind of go crazy. But the idea is, they're inspired by something and they put it out there. And that's the same as I do, same as they do, same as all, as any kind of creator. But the great thing about working in the Marvel Universe, to me, and creating a character in the Marvel Universe, is that other people are going to work with it, right? So like, I certainly, like to work with Spider-Man, or like to work with Batman, or any of those great characters, and put your kind of spin on it to a certain extent, maybe a little bit more for some people, maybe a little bit less. But, the whole Marvel Universe as much as it's, Stan and Jack and maybe Ditko too and a whole bunch of other people, it's really becomes the hundreds, if not thousands, of creators working on it over the last, how long has it been now? Getting into 60 some odd years, and the readers too, because I think, I mean that sincerely. I was, like most people in this business, a reader and a fan first. I worked a long time in retail as a seller, but you maintain that fandom, and what people buy and sell definitely influence the direction of comics, and in that sense, I think everybody has a hand in something like the Marvel Universe, even if you're just a reader. Um, you know, and then it's interesting because, like, for Ducktales, it's, I'm not really adding anything new. I'm not inserting Moon Girl into an old Carl Barks comic, and I'm very satisfied just saying, well, it works so great. I don't really need to change anything. So if you're a fan of classic 1987 Ducktales, unless I misstepped, my certainly intention is just like, oh no, keep it there. Don't reinvent it. It works perfectly great. Just give us more of what we love. The storytelling is a little bit updated because, like Barks and a lot of the Golden Age guys, and even Don Rosa to a certain extent, you work in that 8-panel grid and it's a little bit more static. But, a little hint of things to come, you'll see some of that storytelling implied by Tommaso, our artist, in the issues when they come out. So just a great to be a part of all that. And then, like you said, I have Rocket Girl, which was 100% me and my collaborator Amy Reeder doing what we wanted and didn't have to worry about what came before, because nothing came before.
Yeah, right. So in 1987, as DuckTales is debuting, you are digging in quarter bins for creepy and eerie, which I didn't know about at the time, but if I did, I would have been all about them, right? And I'm reading Fantastic Four, I'm reading Amazing Spider-Man, I'm reading X-Men, I'm reading Superman. That's what I like. That's what first got me into comics in like 1986, right? So I'm reading all that stuff. It's John Byrne on Superman. It was like, to me, I didn't understand the importance of it. To me, it was just Superman. I was like, oh, this is cool. But I was diving into my stepdad's closet to pick up the Savage Sword of Conan, and you mentioned that one. So what were the comics that got you into the industry, man?
Well, I'll tell you a good Savage Sword of Conan story. It's good for me. It's not can't make a movie out of it. But like you said, sneaking into your dad's closet. I thought you were going to say something else. I was getting ready for something.
No, those were more of under the mattress or whatever.
My grandfather. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's good. That's good that you found them. But no, my grandfather was, he was an engineer and he worked on tankers, like Exxon oil tankers that went around the globe, literally shipping oil from one place to the other. So during World War II, he was in the Merchant Marines and spent a lot of years at sea. But then when his grandchildren started getting born, which I'm towards the youngest of, he stopped and kind of was there. But he always had this like I said, this at sea mentality, if that makes any sense, where he would be he worked in the Bronx. So after he stopped working, he was like the chief engineer. Like Scotty would be on the Enterprise, he was on these tankers. So after that, he was working for a hospital up in the Bronx, and if you're familiar with New York City, and he would run all the facilities there, like the air conditioning and the electric and all that stuff. He was in charge of making sure everything was kept. But he still had that at sea mentality. So he would go to the newsstand and get one of everything, not just all the comic books, but all the magazines, all the newspapers, anything you could get. And it was kind of, I think what was ingrained in him was, hey, we're going into port. I don't know when we're going to be back in a port, so let me get everything. Because obviously in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, and even when we were kids, you don't have the internet, right? You don't have any of that stuff. So he would have everything. So I got like everything. It was Archie, Marvel and DC, that type of stuff. And he was a very big reader, again, because it's kind of how he had a very active mind, but also had spent a lot of time just kind of, in a very small room, chugging away from, the Horn of Africa to, New York City and all over the place. So he would, not even read the comics. He'd just kind of pass them on, or sometimes he flipped through them. But the one that he actually always read, because you'd get them back in stacks later, and they were all very much flip through with Savage Sword of Conan. So there's something about, at least as you and I are concerned, Robbie, older guys and Savage Sword. But I love Savage Sword. No relation is Gru by Sergio Aragonés, but that was hugely influential to me.
Book, man.
Yeah. It's still, still great. I tend to go obscure to kind of make it interesting. Alien Legion. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that old Marvel epic book by Karl Potts and Larry Stroman. It was basically the French Foreign Legion in space. So you had like all these different aliens who were kind of, either criminal or kind of ne'er-do-well-ish, who were kind of put together to fight these aliens, stuff like that. Big Spider-Man fan, a big Batman fan too. So it was a little bit of everything. But I definitely, I could single things out, but there's no one thing, because it was all around, and I had older brothers, and so comics were always just a part of it. Like I said, Gru was the one thing that I ever got a subscription to. That was like, so, you can get a subscription. I got Gru. One of my brothers got West Coast Avengers. So West Coast Avengers is special to me. But again, sometimes you look back at this stuff, maybe Gru holds up a little bit better than West Coast Avengers.
Maybe we need the definitive.
Yeah, exactly.
We need the definitive Gru collections. Like, come on, Dark Horse. Like, I don't know what you got to do, but Sergio's one of the best too. I mean, he's up there with Carl Barks, in my opinion. Like, he's one of the best. Never. He's still doing it. Like, a new Gru book just came out this last week. He's still doing it.
Just came out this last week, and just last week he turned to 87 years old. So it's great stuff.
Still cranking away. I love the story of your grandfather, because I got into comics because my stepdad was in the Navy, and he would do that same thing. He would like get into town. He would buy a bunch of comics. He'd ship them to us, right? He'd ship them to me. And when people all the time, they're like, how do we get kids back into comics? I mean, that's how, when I talk to so many people like me and you and other people, we had stepdads or dads or older brothers or grandfathers. We had people that gave us these comics, and like, that's the secret. Give great comics to kids, and they'll grow up comic book fans. They really will.
Yeah.
You got to foster reading.
Yeah. I mean, next year is the 10th anniversary of Moon Girl. And so I've had a lot of observational experience. The reason, invite me back for the 10th anniversary of Moon Girl, and I'll go more into the history of it. But that gig was given to us because, like, hey, we really like what you did on Rocket Girl. Can you kind of do that for Marvel? And, I don't know that the people who kind of started that conversation read Rocket Girl so closely, because that's not a kid's book, right? It's not like crazy adult book, but it's not a kid's book. It's about teenagers, but it's kind of, to me, when I wrote Rocket Girl, it was always about looking back, and it's kind of an adult's perspective of being a teenager, whereas Moon Girl is trying to be more of a kid's perspective, obviously. But the point being, I'm good at making short stories long. I have had a lot of.
I'm losing you a little bit, Brandon.
The saw is. No, you put a comic book on a table with kids in the room, they're all gonna like fight over to read the book. Maybe
Uh-oh. Is Brandon frozen for everybody? Oh, no. Add one more question. Maybe Brandon will pop back in. Is it y'all let me know. Is it Brandon or is it me? What's going on?
I don't know.
Oh, there you are. You're back.
It's probably me. I think I'm back, though. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I thought I saw myself, but I'm not a technical guy, so I don't know. I thought I got to take over the show, and I'd be I'd be the new head honcho. But
yeah, well, why not? All right, well, I got one big question.
Oh no,
right?
Okay, yeah.
So you mentioned the first arc is you're focusing in on Uncle Scrooge and Huey, Dewey, and Louie, as you should. You build from the ground up, but how? I mean, are there plans for this dude? My favorite Gizmo Duck, right there. Come on.
Oh, of course. Yeah, Gizmo Duck is an edition. Maybe I'll get. I should double check this, but Gizmo Duck, I'm pretty sure is an edition of the cartoon. And no, I like Gizmo Duck a lot. And it's funny because I didn't at first because well, everything you want to do with Gizmo Duck, you can kind of do with Gyro Gearloose, although they have different personalities. But I've really come to like Gizmo Duck, and I'm not just saying that because you flashed a PVC figure at me. That, and I really like Doofus. Like I said, so I got to do it. I don't know if you remember the Super Do episode, but that would be a little bit too much, I think. But I'm going to do something cool with their Boy Scouts and Doofus and all that, or the Junior Woodchucks, I should say.
The Junior Woodchuck manual, I love. That was one of my favorite bits in all of, like, even in the comics, right? It was something going on. According to the Junior Woodchuck book, we need to do this and blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
that's super fun stuff. So the book drops in November, right? Right, Brandon?
Yeah, November 6th is the in-store date.
Nice. Any final thoughts? Like, what if somebody thinks that maybe DuckTales is not for me, or maybe I shouldn't check it out? Like, what's the pitch, man? How do we get people excited about DuckTales again? Which I don't think is going to take much, honestly. So
yeah, well, yeah. If you're watching this show, that means you're a comic fan, right? So you're going to be in a comic store, you're going to see DuckTales on the shelf, and like we were saying, everyone wants more kids to read comics, and this is a book you can absolutely give to a kid to read. Or if you have children or a nephew or friends' kids or something where you can actually read it with them, it's you will be well served, because like I said, it gives you a little bit of not just the adventure that is most important. Believe me, that's 80% of it, just like 80% of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur was a really smart, genius kid running around with a big red dinosaur. With our book, it's going to be a lot of fun, an adventure in that sense, but also you get a little bit of what it means to kind of be a hero if you're older, you get a bit of what it means to be a hero to young kids. And if you're a young kid, you get to kind of see like, wow, what would it be like if I just could spend some time with the most amazing person in the world, who happens to be Scrooge McDuck.
Heck yeah. All right, everybody, go sub up right now at your local comic book store.
Yeah. Oh, I'm breaking up, or you are. I don't know, but since like I said, it's and now it says I'm live and it's just me. So if that's true, I'm very excited to be the new pop culture philosophers host. I'll come up with some good programming until Robbie comes back. But I guess until next time, guys, maybe it's best I log off too. Hope you all guys are all good. And I had a lot of fun. Thank you, Robbie. If you can hear me, take it easy.